Someone mapped the patterns. It took time, cataloging impact coordinates across enough deployments to isolate the variables, cross-referencing the sequences, and building a complete picture of what the 380mm high explosive barrage actually does when the shells start falling. The patterns are real. The 380 does not fire at random. Of course, none of that helps the Helldiver standing 60 meters from the beacon when the first shell lands. The variables that determine which pattern you're getting aren't information you have access to in the heat of battle. The arrangement was fixed the moment the beacon left your hand. By the time the first impact gives you any indication of which one you drew, you should already be running. To understand why Super Earth built a weapon this uncontrollable, you have to start with what it replaced. The 120mm high explosive barrage already existed. Super Earth knew how to drop sustained fire on a fixed position from low orbit. For medium outposts, it did the job. What it couldn't handle was scale. Automaton fortresses got so large that the 120 couldn't cover them in a single deployment. Termitid meganests grew beyond their footprint, and Super Earth's answer was not subtle. The 380 fires a 30kg round at 400 meters per second, 6 times the kinetic energy of a 120 shell at the same speed. At roughly Mach 1.17, the round alone has 2.4 megajoules of energy, equivalent to a 2-ton pickup truck hitting a wall at 110 miles per hour. And that's before it explodes. Impact force depends on how fast the shell decelerates. If we assume it's hitting a concrete or metal bunker, and that it stops completely in 5 milliseconds, it delivers 2,400,000 newtons of force, which is roughly 245 metric tons of force, concentrated onto a single 380mm point. Since shells generally have a 15% explosive to weight ratio, we can also assume the shell has about 4.5 kilograms of explosive. Combined with the 2.4 megajoules from the impact alone, that means we likely have about 23 megajoules of energy unleashed upon impact. Roughly 23 sticks of old-fashioned dynamite. And it delivers 15 of those rounds. 5 salvos of 3, 1 second between each, 3 seconds between salvos, 20 seconds from the first impact to the last, all of it falling inside a 36-meter bombardment zone. 9 meters wider in every direction than the 120's footprint. That reach is why the stratagem exists. Firing 15 380 shells in roughly 30 seconds is a terrifying engineering feat. Old world battleships used 400mm guns, but a single barrel could only fire about 2 rounds per minute due to the extreme heat, gas buildup, and mechanical reload times. Super Earth has optimized destroyer-class spaceships to handle this. The barrage cycles through dozens of fixed shell arrangements, seeded by variables that are tracked quietly in the background. How many other stratagems have been called in before it? The cardinal direction of the throw, and others. Throw the 380 as your first stratagem on a fresh deployment, and you'll get one consistent pattern. Throw it as your 10th, and you'll get a different one. The arrangement is predetermined at call-in, but in the middle of a firefight, it's unreadable. The call-in time is 8.45 seconds, the longest in the Orbital lineup, and intentionally so. That delay is the escape window Super Earth built in. Use it. The minimum safe distance from the beacon is 65 meters. 15 anti-tank rounds distributed across a 36-meter zone don't distinguish between Automaton and Helldiver. Starting cooldown is a hefty 240 seconds. Morale augmentation brings it to 228. 0G breach loading cuts it to 216. With all upgrades, you land at about 205 seconds. Still over 3 minutes, but 35 seconds shorter than the default. What makes the cost acceptable is what a single deployment can accomplish. Other ship modules affect the stratagem. Atmospheric monitoring matters most. It tightens the scatter pattern by 15%, which means fewer shells landing at the outer edge of the radius, and more landing in the center where the objectives are. On anything smaller than a full fortress compound, it's the difference between a deployment that clears targets and one that craters empty ground. More guns adds a 6th salvo, 3 more shells landing inside the same footprint, longer duration and more coverage per call. Exploding shrapnel reduces damage fall-off at the blast edge, and high-density explosives widens each blast radius by 10%. What these modules cannot change is that the arrangement is widely spread, and that's the problem that the loadout around it needs to answer. Against Terminids, the 380 earns its slot on one condition. There needs to be a large, fixed structure worth demolishing. Mega nests, hatcheries, shrieker nests, dense clusters of bug holes inside a single compound. In that context, the 15 anti-tank shells across a wide area destroy a meaningful number of objectives per deployment. But really, bot bases are the reason this weapon exists. Automatons have high walls, fabricators, cannon turrets, and mortar emplacements. Everything a fortified bot compound needs is precisely what a 380 does. Once those structures are gone, the base stays clear. Throw the beacon deep into the compound, put 65 meters between yourself and it, and return to finish what survives. Against the Illuminate, the 380 performs better than most Helldivers expect, assuming you pick your targets. Groups of grounded warp ships are large and static, and a barrage through an encampment destroys several per deployment. Against voteless swarms in the open, not so much. The 4-minute cooldown means the 380 cannot carry an operation alone. The most direct problem is that you cannot always rely on where the bombs are going to land. For heavies, the barrage misses, and it will miss some. The FAF-14 Spear deserves more attention here than it usually gets. It locks onto fabricators, hulks, tanks, and cannon turrets from up to 300 meters away, which is exactly the profile of the armored target that survived the initial scatter. It also handles gunships, which the 380 cannot touch anyway, and the Quasar Cannon and recoilless rifle fill the same anti-armor gap with more ammunition, flexibility. But they require a clear line of sight and manual tracking on whatever survives the bombardment. The Orbital Precision Strike covers the structures the barrage misses. It fires the same shell, same damage, same anti-tank penetration, but lands exactly where you throw the beacon. A compound that's mostly cleared but still has a few fabricators standing gets 2 precision strikes on exact coordinates. Its 90-second cooldown means it cycles more than twice before the 380 finishes reloading. The two don't compete for the same targets, and neither gets wasted. Eagle stratagems are popular to handle the cleanup. The Eagle airstrike targets clustered survivors, while the 500 kilogram handles the heavy enemies that keep chugging along despite glancing blows. Eagle rearming is fast enough that follow-up charges are available across the full 240-second reload. For what the Eagles don't reach, the EAT-17 handles surviving hulks and chargers on a 70-second cooldown, short enough to cycle multiple times. Against Terminids specifically, the Napalm Barrage covers what the 380 doesn't. The 380 will clear fixed nest structures, and the Napalm holds the ground around active spawns while it reloads. On a large enough target, there is a simple option. 2 380mm barrages on the same compound, a few seconds apart. The first covers its pattern, the second covers what the first didn't. It costs 2 loadout slots and needs a teammate willing to coordinate, but against a genuine automaton fortress, it is the most thorough base clearing option in the Orbital lineup. But all that, of course, assumes the 380 was the right call to begin with. The 120 fires the same shell, anti-tank penetration, the same demolition force. What it doesn't share is the cooldown or the footprint. The 120 covers a tighter area and reloads in 180 seconds. 380 covers a wider area and takes 240. That 60-second gap compounds across a mission. For every 3 uses of the 380, the 120 has cycled 4 times. That's the center of the argument against the 380. More uptime, tighter footprint, and on the targets most squads actually encounter. The tighter radius concentrates shells on the compound rather than past it. Against a medium-sized outpost, the 120 covers the structures inside. The 380's wider scatter means some shells land outside the outpost entirely, doing nothing. The argument for the 380 is the scale. Against the compound, where the outer fabricators are 50 meters from the inner square turrets, the 120's tighter radius handles the front half and leaves the back half standing. The 380 covers the full depth. There's a point where the target gets large enough that the tighter footprint becomes a liability, where you're not just clearing a base, you're clearing a fortress that doesn't fit inside that smaller blast zone. That's where the trade-off makes sense. Most operations, though, don't produce targets often enough to make the 380 the default pick all of the time. The 120 handles the majority of what shows up faster, with more room to respond to what comes next. The 380 is for when the target is genuinely large enough to need it. And on automaton operations at great difficulty, those targets exist. On bug missions, against anything smaller than a mega nest, the 120 is usually the more efficient choice. But some soldiers always opt for the biggest explosion for the glory of Super Earth. Every Helldiver who throws the 380 has the same experience. The beacon arcs towards the compound, and you're already moving. 65 meters is the rule, and you're not double checking to make sure you're far enough. Behind you, the first shell lands, then the second. You find out how the deployment went after the smoke clears. Sometimes the compound is leveled end to end. Sometimes there's some cleanup work to do. Either way, 15 shells, none of them yours to place individually. All of them theirs to survive. Thank you all so much for watching. If you've been waiting for the 380, I hope this did it justice. We're down to 2, smoke and laser. Probably smoke next and end with the laser, but who knows? Let me know which one you want down in the comments, and we'll see what comes next. Make sure while you're on your way down there to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I super appreciate the support. For now though, I think that's it. I'll see you next time.